Meeting order, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have on there a little bit of a change on the agenda tonight. We have an item under unfinished business, the item 1214. We have an email we found tonight from Councilmember Tahar, and we will be having a motion to receive the email from Linda Tahar requesting removal from the Police Chief Task Force and to confirm the appointment of Councilmember Morrow to serve on the Police Chief Search Task Force, replacing Councilmember Tahar. So
It's going to go right after the consent.
it'll go right after consent, right before new business, for those of you that are wondering where that belongs. And do we have any other changes to the agenda? Okay, if not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Gerba, second Tahar. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we need a motion to excuse the absence of Councilmember Rhodes.
So moved.
Gerba, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Roth. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Cindy Zupko is here to do the Michigan Main Street update.
Hello.
Bring the big poster in.
Pardon me? Yeah, I should have.
Go get it.
Well, first, I'd like to, on behalf of the Saline Main Street Board, thank you all for your support through all of this time. I mean, we've been together for almost 2 years trying to get this to happen, and it finally happened. So thank you to City Council and all of the other bodies and all the other organizations in the community that supported us through this process. The Michigan Main Street Center has sent us a very lengthy document of all the services that they'll be providing us. So I wanted to very quickly go through. Oh, you did. This was
Hey,
from
Tim,
our.
can you get this on the TV? Where does it need to go? Like that? Okay, you want to explain this?
This was part of our presentation in Lansing, which was one of our final presentation.
Do you want a
that-
walk around microphone?
Pardon me?
Do you want to walk around microphone?
Oh, I'm okay. Am I blocking it or anything?
No.
12 pieces represent 12 different groups. Actually, we had some multiples in there, so there was probably about 15 different groups. And some of you went up to Lansing with us. But we went up to show the Michigan Main Street Center what our community was all about. We took about 62 people.
You need a microphone.
I
Because
do.
there's a lot of students here that probably don't know about the Main Street program.
Okay.
So maybe we could do a little step back in history, if you don't mind. Just because we know you did you and your committee did so much work, and it's nice to be able to share everything with our
How far back do you want me to go?
What?
How far back would you like me to go?
This is good. Whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. Well, we have been in the associate level Main Street program, and what the Michigan Main Street program is they bring us 5 years of technical service to help us build a very strong and sustainable organization that will focus on downtown revitalization. We started a couple years ago. The associate level was training wheels, so we went around to the other communities throughout the state to see if that's really what we felt would work here in Saline. And our board did feel that way, came to City Council and asked to apply for the select level, which got us into the program itself, and then we actually become Saline Main Street, and we actually receive 5 years of that assistance, and that's what I was going to talk about tonight. So we are now the 17th Main Street program in the state of Michigan. There are over 2,000 Main Street programs in the country, and this has been an organization that was created by the National Trust for Historic Preservation over 30 years ago. So it's very exciting for our community, and you'll get to see lots and lots of things happening, and anybody can get involved in that. But we had to submit an application in December. It was very intense. We had been working on it since last February, almost a year ago. There were a lot of components in order to do that. There were 6 communities that filed a letter of intent. We were the only community that actually finished the application because the application is pretty significant, and we finished it, so we were very proud of that. The Michigan Main Street Center came down in January and did a site visit, looked around to make sure that we were a good fit for the Michigan Main Street program and the Main Street 4-point approach, and they determined that we were, so then we were invited to do a presentation in front of the advisory committee, and that turned out to be about 20 people at Lansing at the Michigan State Housing and Development Authority offices, so it's a state program. So we took 62 people from the community representing all of these groups, and it included farmers and farmers markets, service clubs, the arts and culture in our community, our faith-based community, city government, township government, the Saline area schools, Saline Leadership Institution, our library, our downtown community, businesses and property owners. Who am I missing? The Saline Area Historic Society, and the chamber, and then all of our events and festivals. So we tried to give them a really good overview of what our community is and how exciting it is to be here in Saline. And I think we accomplished that, don't you? So when each of the groups were challenged to create their own puzzle, and we did a parade. And the parade, because our theme was Route 12 to Main Street, and the theme was because we are on Route 12, and we were vying for the Michigan Main Street title in 2012, which we're really glad that it happened, because 2013 wouldn't have worked with that whole theme. So our presentation was a parade, because we love our holiday parade here, and it's very significant in our community. So each of the groups also had a wagon or some kind of vehicle that they decorated. Each group had about an average 5 to 6 people, and then we paraded them in front of all these advisory committee members, and they told a little bit about what their group does and what their role is in the community, and then how they felt they could fit into the Main Street community. And in addition, when they were finished speaking, they brought their puzzle piece up, put it on the puzzle. When we were done with the puzzle in all 12 groups, this piece was missing. And what we told them was that we had a very significant missing piece, which was the Michigan Main Street program. So that's how we ended our presentation. Is that good?
The hen.
Pardon me?
The hen.
The hand?
Hen.
Oh, the hen. We had a dog in our presentation, and also Henrietta the chicken. I don't know if you know the story about Henrietta. She was wandering around in the street, and David Rhodes, actually.
Henry Street.
On Henry Street. That's why she's called Henrietta. So she came along with us too, and they enjoyed all of that. Am I missing anything?
Oh, that's great.
Okay. Now we can go on with, should I give this to you?
Thank you, Cindy. I know that wasn't planned, but as
Yeah.
usual.
And the students were represented by Julia Hagokian, Tyler Sheets, and Laura McCann, and your Stinga, the Hornet, Reed came. So all 4 of them represented, and they did a great job. So what's next? Tomorrow we have a webinar that will explain all of our services for the next 5 years. It's going to be held here in the conference room for board and team members, and it's open to the public. If anybody wants to come and fit in that room, that's fine. We are also planning a community announcement party where it will be a press conference. That will be the week of the 20th, and Michigan Main Street will be here. We'll do kind of a ceremonial thing, and they'll bring our road signs that say Saline, which is part of the Michigan Main Street program, and we'll get 2 signs on each side of town, which will be really great. They'll give us training and assistance in hiring our first Main Street manager. That's one of the requirements, is that we have to have a full-time Main Street manager on board, because there are going to be so many activities that we need to do. We need somebody full-time in that office that will help us coordinate those activities and all of those volunteers. In April, some representatives from National Main Street Center will be here, along with the Michigan Main Street Center, to do a baseline assessment. That's where the whole community will be involved. And we'll start setting some not so much goals, but what they'll do is they'll educate the community a little bit further on what the Michigan Main Street four-point approach is, so that everybody understands where we're going from here. May or June, we'll have board training. This is a 2-day. Our volunteers are going to be very busy in the next year. We'll have board training in May and June. We'll have manager training in June. We have individual committee trainings, which they come down. All of this is going to happen in our community. So they're going to spend 2.5 hours with each committee, training them on what each of those committees do. We'll do work plan development, and what that means is all of our committees and volunteers will understand how to create a work plan, and that work plan will be set from the goals and objectives that are set by the committees and the board, and then task who's doing them, where are we getting the money to do it, and how is it going to get done, when is it going to get done. This program is we have to be very accountable. Every month there are monthly reporting that we have to send to the state. So you will get the same reports that they're pretty detailed, and we have a benchmark that's set, and then every month we have to report how our progress is going. We'll have quarterly trainings. Those happen outside of our community. We go to other Main Street communities so we can learn a little bit about how their programs work. And then in January, they will do, it's called the Main Street Building Basics, and they'll come down and work with our design team, which design works on everything physical, our historic buildings, our public realm, streetscape, and things like that. But they're going to learn about historic preservation and how to help those business and property owners, how to make sure that they maintain those historic structures, because that's really what we're based on here. We will, over the 5-year period, get $30,000 to $40,000 worth of design services. So architectural, if we identify any buildings that need facade improvements or any kind of major improvements, they will do the architectural renderings and help us get to that point so that we can see what those buildings can look like and how can we get those renovations done. They're always available to help our communities. They'll be down here anytime we call them. If our committees get stuck, they'll be here to help. And then over the rest of the 5 years, we're going to be working on volunteer development. We will do a market study in this community. Our market study right now, through the blueprint plan that we did, is really past due to get redone. It was a 2005 to 2010. And market studies usually about a 5-year. The market study that they'll do with us is a whole lot more in depth than what happened at the blueprint. And when you do a market study, then we identify what we really need and what can really be supportable in our community for business recruitment efforts. They'll do entrepreneurship training, retail merchandising, event training, branding, business recruitment training, fundraising, public relations, commercial real estate development, and they have an incredible resource library, not only through the Michigan Main Street program, but we're also connected to the National Main Street Center, which gets us thousands of people that we can get brain stuff from and really help develop new programs. So that's kind of a quickie overview. Any questions? We're excited. We know it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of volunteers. So our website, there's a place for anyone that's interested. People are starting to email and call and say, how can I be involved? And we are ready, especially since the training is coming up. It'd be best to jump on board now so they can get the training and really figure out what committees they would like to work on, where they best fit. So we're pretty excited about that.
Great, thanks. Any questions? I just like to say thanks to you and all your volunteers. It was really an amazing experience being up in Lansing, and I know Todd Campbell's on the board as the council or city liaison, and just want to say thank you to all of you guys for everything that you've done to represent the city so well. And it is quite a coup to get this, and I know it took a lot of work on your time and a lot of other people, so thank you very much.
When I counted up all the people, I mean, I didn't even get everybody in there, but there were at least 100 people that really worked on making this happen. So that's
great.
pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, that's great. Mr. Roth.
Cindy, I want to thank you, and can you give us the time for the webinar tomorrow?
Tomorrow, the webinar is at noon.
Isn't it
Our calendar has
Wednesday? Isn't it Wednesday?
It's Wednesday, I'm sorry. Did I say tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's Wednesday, March 7th.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Jim. Mr. Roth.
And also, we are tentatively targeting Tuesday, the 20th, ideally, to do something in that evening. So if council could maybe pencil that off, and Cindy will get back as soon as you can from me. So I just check with Todd right before the meeting.
Okay.
That seemed to be.
We have a board meeting tomorrow night. We're going to nail those dates down because we have to
Great.
have them to them before the webinar on Wednesday.
Great, okay,
at noon.
thanks. And thanks
Okay.
again for all your hard
Thank
work
you.
and the presentation. Citizen comments on agenda items under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on items that appear on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury, and it would be regarding 1234 wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation project. I noticed that there's a lot of things that are warranted in this study, but the part that concerns me is that this urban, as far as Saline Ventures, that it says as a result of meetings between representatives of Saline Ventures and the city staff to consider prospects of the urban expansion into the Saline Township. Then it says the current service area does not include the 1,500 acres in Saline Township. Now, and of course, I'm hoping that the council will explain in a public forum, because our water rates are going up. As it says, our sewer rates just went up, and how we can finance certain things. But I personally do not want to take on the Saline Mobile Home Park in the Saline Township, and I don't want any 425s or whatever they all call the things, to where eventually after 20 years it comes into the city, or we pay taxes like next to Pittsfield and it goes back to Pittsfield. We have a city to take care of. Our water and sewer is very expensive, and it's not for speculation for builders or for expanding our city, unless they want to run a bond and they want to pay for the improvements.
Hi, I'm Raymond Schmidt.
I'm Adam Lang.
Bill Poet. Our question was, why is the purchase of the new police patrol vehicle, why was that necessary?
Okay, we'll discuss it as part of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other citizen comment? Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda. On the following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Councilor Ross.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Move Marl, do we have a second?
I support.
Second Peters. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under unfinished business, we have the item 1214. This is a motion to receive the email of March 5th from Councilmember Tahar requesting removal from the Police Chief Search Task Force, and to confirm the appointment of Councilmember Morrell to serve on the Police Chief Search Task Force, replacing Councilmember Tahar.
So moved to acknowledge receipt and to appoint Mr. Morrow.
Move Gearbout, do we have a second? We have a second for this motion?
I second.
Okay, Mr. Roth. Discussion?
Yes, thank you. I just would like to say that my reasons for requesting to resign from the committee have nothing to do with the process itself. It's time conflict. I had made plans that when I examined the timeline that's projected for the process, I would not be able to put in the kind of work and carry out the responsibilities in the way that that I would like to do it. So I felt it was best to step back and have someone who's scheduled to not have that conflict. Thanks.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1234, the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation project. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 28, 2012 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel and the wastewater treatment facility Superintendent Skull, the February 28, 2012 letter of proposal from Tetra Tech to approve or not approve the professional engineering services proposal from Tetra Tech in their letter dated February 28, 2012 in the amount of $19,800, and to authorize or not authorize the city manager to sign the city's acceptance of said proposal. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve and to authorize.
Second.
Move Tahar, second Peters. Mr. Rubel, and how about all you guys want to? And maybe we could put the map on this thing so we could take pictures, maybe talk about it a little bit. We did have a work session on this before the meeting to sort of go through this, but we'll go through it one more time for questions. Yeah, you want, would you mind? Can you just talk about how the plant works? That would be great. It's not under the camera. Does it need to be under the camera in order for, how does?
Is it under the camera?
No, it's not.
Hold the table left, right, yeah, left.
What's it?
Do you have the thingy that go, Zoomer thing?
It's reading it, it's gone on.
You guys are getting a lot of lessons in how the city operates tonight. But you never knew what happened after you flushed the toilet, did you? You guys been there? Most importantly, it goes into our river, right, at some point. So we want to make sure it goes into our river clean. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the work we need to do on the facility. Okay,
well,
Bob?
this is an aerial view of the wastewater treatment plant. It's located at North Street by the river. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, take this cordless, Bob.
The city of Salinas sewer system is serviced by 3 main trunk lines that enter the plant at the influent building located here. And from here, it's screened and then pumped to the grit removal at the top of the hill here. Here, the grit is removed. There's a lot of sand in wastewater. It's very abrasive on the equipment, so it's important to be removed. From there, it flows to the primary treatment tanks, which are the 2 covered tanks right here and here. There we add ferric chloride and a polymer to help the settling process. From the primary tanks, we go on, the flow goes upstream to the RBCs located here. These are rotating biological contactors. And what they do is they remove the organic material through a biological process. From there, the water travels to the final tanks where they get one more chance to settle. We add chemicals for phosphorus removal, and it gives another chance to settle out anything, any particulate matter. Then it flows to the sand filter building here, where it's polished, and after that, it's ran through a UV light, which is a disinfection. It kills any pathogens in the water before it's discharged to the river. The solids that settle out of during the process are pumped to these a tank called a digester. It's the one that's labeled A. The city has actually 3, but only 1 is currently being used as a digester. It breaks down the solids through a biological process. It's retained, it's heated, it's kept in there about 45 days, and it reduces the volatile organics in the sludge. From there, it flows to this large square tank here, which is a sludge storage tank, and it's from there, it's applied to farmers' fields 2 to 3 times a year. It's usually injected about 9 inches under the surface, and it's used as a fertilizer.
Thanks. Any questions? Anybody have any questions about the process? Any questions back there about the process? No? Okay, thanks, Mr. Skull. Okay, so we have some work to do on the facility.
Right, correct.
Mr. Rubel, you're going to talk about that? Mr.
Well,
Skull?
just briefly, in the action tonight, there's a staff memo that explains why the proposal is brought to the City Council and what the rehabilitation areas are. And then, of course, the proposal submitted by Mr. Tom Alba of Tetra Tech, and Tom can speak to the elements of the proposal if you have any further questions. What brought us here was the fact that Bob pointed out to us earlier in the year that there are a number of deficiencies out there from equipment and from a structural standpoint. The plant's aging. Most of the facilities are 25 or more years older, and they need to be maintained in a better operating condition so we can keep our efficiency going, improve safety out there at the facility, and also meet our discharge limits from our state permit, our NPDES permit. And so all told, we recognize that there are certain processes out there that need study by our consultant engineer, Tetra Tech, who has been responsible for the last 20 years for providing such studies for both the water treatment facility and the wastewater facility, and our reliability studies to make sure that those facilities work properly. And so tonight we are asking the council to approve the first step in the process, and that's the study. After the study is completed, then a program will come back for council consideration to see what priorities we want to pursue, and what whether it's a phased approach or whether we can do a lot at one time. That'll come in about 8 weeks, I think, 8 to 10 weeks.
Could you speak to the comments that were made under citizen comments about expansion?
Right. Right now, I mean, the study is limited to only servicing the vacant properties within our corporate limits. The statement made earlier about Saline Township was only a part of a background reference, because we know something in the future is going to happen, but that's going to kick in a whole different set of studies and means of dealing with development. So right now, the current study is only to rehabilitate the existing facility to meet our current needs,
Okay.
not service any township improvements. Because we have enough vacant land here, especially industrial land, that will probably need capacity for both water and wastewater. So with that, I guess I would ask Mr. Alba if you want to just make a general overview on his proposal.
Thank you, Gary. And thank you, Saline City Council, for the opportunity to come here and speak this evening. To help maybe put a little more in perspective, the way a wastewater treatment plant works is relatively dirty water comes in, relatively clean water goes back to the river, and the products, the residual products from that cleaning process end up as biosolids or sludge. And this particular study and evaluation is to look at those facilities at the treatment plant that are there to render those biosolids relatively inert so that they can, as Bob said, be used as an agricultural supplement on local farmland, which is good reuse of those things. As Gary said, the intent is not to evaluate increases in capacity, but it's to look at reliability, operational safety, and energy efficiency in that part of the plant which is dealing with the residuals primarily. And Bob pointed out there are anaerobic digesters down here. These residual products go into an anaerobic digester where bacteria that operate in the absence of oxygen destroy some of the solids. They generate a usable gas, which is mostly methane gas, and then through that process, pathogenic organisms are mostly destroyed, and odor-causing substances are significantly reduced, and it makes the stuff very usable, as I said. So what we're going to look at is in that area of the plant, which has been there for more than 25 years, there's a lot of equipment which is no longer operational or functional. And in order for these processes to work efficiently and effectively, things need to be replaced because they've just reached the end of their useful life. Valves, piping systems, some pumps. There's a boiler which heats the plant, it heats the digesters. It burns some of the gas that's created in the digester, but the boiler is on its last legs. And a new boiler, which will burn both natural gas and digester gas, will increase the reliability of the process and also increase the efficiency of the use of energy. So we're going to look at those things. Digesters to function properly require mixing, and the mixers in the primary digester here have again reached the end of their useful life. And there are new technologies for that kind of stuff which are available. We'll look at those and try to get this part of the plant to operate just as effectively as it can. In this case, to evaluate those things, to kind of come up with recommendations for how this can best be accomplished, with cost opinions for how much we think it will cost, and an assessment of what that impacts in terms of not just capital cost but operational cost. Write a report and in conjunction with city staff, and then bring that back to city council for your consideration to look at some of these pretty necessary improvements at this city facility.
Will you be able to add, Councilmember Roth requested to look at removal of some items that aren't being currently used?
We absolutely can. There are things that are obsolete. One of them in particular, and this, as Bob pointed out, these are old abandoned tanks. They were once the biological treatment process at the plant. They've long been abandoned since early 1980s, I think. Actually, when there were discussions about a significant increase in the capacity of the plant, that's probably the area of the site where capacity improvements might go in the future. So removing those things might make sense now or relatively soon. Also, this plant accepts a lot of septage from around Washtenaw County and maybe out of the county too. It's an important revenue source. It's a very good environmental thing for the city of Saline to do. When we look at the facilities for handling septage, which are kind of integrally tied to the digestion system, we're charged with looking at whether they could be better situated on site to make them be more efficient, more operable, maybe more secure, make it easier for the plant staff to collect the revenue from that. And those abandoned trickling filter basins are one area that we'll look at when it comes to assessing the best thing to do with septage in the future, too.
So other questions from council? Well, there was a lot of comments made earlier. It would probably be good for the...
Mayor, I'd just like to make statements. This is great. We've been talking about this as one of our goals for this year, was to assess the treatment plan and to look at what needed to be improved upon it. As like any other facility, I agree. It's been 25 years from the one building, and since the 60s on the other building. A lot of things need to be looked at, preventative maintenance. Some things have been done, improvements, but we haven't looked at the whole facility and looking at those items. The intent is just to improve upon the efficiencies, as you mentioned. That's where I see this as being our best goal for us, to try and look at how to best utilize this plan, including even in the septic receptacles and such, so that we can basically continue to monitor this plan and have it be paying for itself, but also being able to be extended its life expectancy out. Yeah, I think at some point in time, we're probably going to have to look at additional expansion or whatever, but that isn't until our economy comes back, until the growth comes on, and at that point, that's when we'll deal with it. But I think, as you told us in the previous meeting, and I think I'd like to reiterate to the individuals listening, that these efficiencies will help not only expand some of the capacity of the plant, but actually address some of these issues that, we're always looking towards, cost effectiveness, cost savings, and looking to use our dollars best to help our citizens here and our current businesses and such. So I think this is a great approach to move forward. At least it gives us a starting point, and going from there, then we can decide on our priorities of how we want to handle this.
Mr. Peters?
I think there's probably a few issues we'll ever vote on here at City Council are more important than the wastewater treatment plant. And without it, there is no Saline. Without these plants, there are no cities at all. And I think the Tetra Tech's a fine outfit, and these issues are technical, and it's important that we get it right. And so I'm full support of this particular issue.
Any other comments? I just will repeat what Mr. Roth, did you want to make your comment about what you said earlier?
I'd like to see the plant be as efficient as possible. One of the things that wasn't mentioned, I think, in discussion is there's some actual physical problems as far as with the structure. There's cracks, and there's actually light coming through and heat loss and that type of stuff. That wasn't mentioned. I'd like to see that stuff definitely taken care of, so the structure is good. I look at far as like to reclaim and clean out all the stuff that's not being used, that's like junk. Let's clean out the house and also clean up the property, because I think that's part of maintaining a good plant. And as time allows, I'd like to see that happen. And as you mentioned, the possible use for that space that we can reclaim. So I certainly appreciate that being looked into.
For sure.
And, I also brought up, it was discussed in the memo from Mr. Rubel, the fact that there have been new housing starts in the city, and there is some interest, there has been interest in the past in Saline Township on the west side. And there is a developer that has approached the city again to look at, expanding the capacity of the lines out there, and we made it very clear to them that they would have to pay for it in the study. So I just want to make sure there wasn't any misunderstanding, and that was just sort of the beginning steps of how this conversation came about with meetings with Bob and Mr. Skull, our facilities manager there, and how this came, to fruition here at this part. And we really talked a lot about making sure that whatever we do is in sync with the future development and the technology of processing wastewater, and also, keeping in mind that there will be probably some demand that we can't meet in the, not too distant future, probably, 4 or 5 years, I would think, maybe sooner. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know, Mr. Campbell, if you've heard back from them, but we haven't, we basically left it with them. If they wanted to do this, they would need to pay for it, and so far they aren't interested, so there's obviously not enough demand yet. So,
Right.
but
Well, as we discussed, and I think it's an important point to make, anything that's going to come out of this study and report as a recommendation is going to look towards the future, not in terms necessarily of increasing the capacity of the plant right now, but as we discussed, to ensure that you're not spending money now on something that's a short-term fix for a condition that could change, where that money cannot be transposed and the facilities created still function with whatever might change in the future at the treatment plant in terms of its capacity or changing regulations or anything like that.
Right.
The recommendations that come out of this study will be compatible with the future, regardless of what the future might bring for this plant. So,
okay. Future, Mr. Harms.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say I appreciate the forward-thinking approach that you're taking, and I think I fully support the project. I think it's critical to invest in our infrastructure, and I think this is a very important investment.
Is there any further comments? No further comments? Thank you very much. We have a motion to approve and authorize. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1235, the purchase of police patrol vehicle. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of February 14, 2012 memo from Interim Police Chief Lindman to approve or not approve the purchase of a 2012 Chevrolet Tahoe from Bill Crispin Chevrolet at a cost of $26,734.15, and outfitting the vehicle by Priority 1 Emergency at a cost of $6,841.98 for a total cost of $33,576.13, with funding coming from the General Fund Police Department budget.
Move to approve.
Second.
Morrell, second. Tahar. Hello.
Guess
You guys are quick. Okay. You want,
Right?
no. So you want to go through the memo and then perhaps touch on the comments, hopefully touch on the comments citizen comments that were made?
Sure, I'd like to, I'll start by addressing the citizen comments on why the vehicle is needed. The current vehicle, Vehicle 121, has 117,000 miles on it. Once a vehicle gets that type of mileage, there's a lot of time that the vehicle is down for repair. It increases the cost of the vehicle. Anytime the vehicle is down, can I use the microphone so I could? This way I can answer their questions at the same time. As I started to say, the vehicles are down as they get older quite a bit of the time, so that causes other vehicles to be used, wear and tear on those vehicles. It increases the cost of the vehicle. We have wear and tear on the other vehicles. There's a lot of hidden safety costs that are associated with an older vehicle. For instance, there might be suspension problems that the officers never even notice while they're driving the vehicle. They could get into some type of pursuit or emergency situation and have problems with the suspension on the vehicle. So as the vehicle gets older, it needs to be replaced. And usually the studies indicate that the vehicle should be replaced between 70 to 80,000 miles. So at this particular time, we're in pretty bad need of a new vehicle. And did you have some other questions?
Does council have any questions? Mr. Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for being here this evening, Interim Police Chief and Sergeant Basso. I do have a few questions, and I appreciate your comments directed towards a couple of our citizens who made a statement earlier, because we go through this process routinely, and I think sometimes we become a little bit blasé about it, and I think it's important to clarify and be specific with our constituents why we do this so often and why it's so imperative. Since most of the people in the audience this evening and those who will be watching at home do not have the very thorough and detailed memorandum dated February the 14th that your office has provided, can you go over briefly why we are no longer able to invest in a Crown Vic, and why it's your opinion that we don't go out on the open market and look for one, and then talk a little bit about the benefits of investing in a Tahoe, maybe with a specific emphasis on why, because of space, and because we deal with a lot of situations during periods of inclement weather, why it would be beneficial to have a vehicle like that.
The first part of the question on the Crown Victoria, we've had a fleet of Crown Victorias. In fact, that's with the exception of one Explorer, it's been Crown Victorias that have been in our fleet. This past March, Ford quit making the Crown Victoria. So at present time, we've actually looked in the state for a Crown Victoria, and there are none that match our particular fleet. It might be possible to find the Crown Victoria. In fact, we did find some out of state, but to go out of state after one increases our transportation costs, plus the dealer was going to have to purchase the vehicle, which was going to add quite a bit to the price. So having said that, the Crown Victoria is no longer feasible for us to obtain as a police vehicle. So we've done some studies as to what vehicle that we should get. And we looked at the advantages of all the vehicles. Actually, the first requirement is that a police vehicle needs to be pursuit rated. And if it's not pursuit rated, there's liability with the vehicle, and we can't use the vehicle. So that was the first thing that we looked at. That limited the number of vehicles. And in fact, ultimately, it limited to an Impala, a Caprice, the Tahoe, and a couple of Dodge Chargers. Ford this year actually didn't have any vehicles. They had some prototypes that were tested, but they're not going to be available till 2013 models, and that's the Explorer and the Taurus. So when we looked at the vehicles that were out there, we felt that the best vehicle for us was the Tahoe, and it was for several reasons. The state police, when they rate the vehicles, They rate them by different categories, which be performance, gas mileage, I'll get all of them here, vehicle dynamics, ergonomics, I believe those are the main areas. And the Tahoe finished the highest in ergonomics, which is the environment inside the vehicle for police officers, which is kind of their office. It was the best for them to be able to handle all the electronic equipment, the communications. It also is the easiest vehicle to be worked on when it comes to outfitting the vehicle. So it was a, excuse me, it finished first there. It also has the highest resale value. So when it comes to selling of the vehicle at the end, it held its value the best. It also was per mile the cheapest vehicle when we considered all the repairs and everything that went along with it. So that's why we're recommending the Tahoe.
Mr. Morrow.
Just have one other comment, and the good sergeant and I have talked about this at length, but obviously, I should preface by saying, as the mover of this motion, obviously I'm very enthusiastic about investing in a Tahoe, and I appreciate the work that you two gentlemen invested in submitting a report to us with a lot of specifics and a lot of data, which helps us to make an informed decision. I appreciate that. But to my more important point, I know the automobile is not online currently, but Carbon Motors, which is based out of Indiana, will be in the future manufacturing and marketing an automobile specifically for police departments, which comes fully equipped. The only thing that we have to put on it, to my understanding, is the decaling that would indicate that it's a Saline police car. It's a diesel automobile, and then the requirement is that you resale it, am I correct, Sergeant Basso? Back to Carbon Motors. I went on their website again today, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same, but I'd like to just be cognizant of that in the future, because once it's evaluated, I have the assumption that it's going to receive high praise and be something that we should strongly consider investing in. There is a more substantial upfront cost, but you can keep the vehicle twice as long.
I was talking to Sergeant Basso earlier on that, and he did call the rep at Carbon Motors, and it does look like exactly what you're saying, a very good vehicle for the future. It apparently isn't going to be in production for 3 more years, so we'll have to keep our eyes open.
Thank you.
Further discussion? You know, Ford is the Taurus the new police car alternative? Because they had a big display at not this year's auto show, but last year's about their new.
Isn't it a total redesign? I thought they were building a car up from scratch. Ford was.
What Ford has done was they once they got rid of the Crown Vic, their new police interceptor is actually the Taurus, although they won't call it the Taurus, they call it the police interceptor. And for 2012, the state police tested the prototype of both that and the Explorer. The Explorer is also being built off the Taurus chassis. They will become available in 2013 models. And I believe we could order them as early, if that's what we were looking at, as early as April, but I'm not sure of the delivery date. There were also other vehicles that we looked at, the Caprice, which was a nice vehicle, but it's a 7-month wait. That comes out of Australia. So there were a lot of good vehicles, but the one that we could get in fairly good time, the one that when I've talked to other departments at the chiefs' meetings, everybody raves about the Tahoe. We had somebody from the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department in here with their Tahoe looking at it, and it just, we get really rave reviews on it.
So and also my other question, is there any hybrid vehicles?
None of those are pursuit rated. We actually have prices on hybrid vehicles, but yeah, they're not pursuit rated.
Just curious. Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Tahar?
Thank you. I have a comment. I understand that these may not be the most critical factors in the decision, and you did a really good job of laying out the factors. But I also appreciate about the recommendation that you're recommending using a local dealer. and also that I believe the Tahoe is assembled in the U.S. And-
Yes, it is.
And I understand those are not the most critical pieces of the puzzle, but that was important to me as well.
Thank you. The dealership that we've recommended has just been very, very helpful, which is Bill Crispin.
Great. Is there further discussion on this motion? Mr. Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just to piggyback on that, typically, it's very hard for local dealerships that don't have the state bid or a county bid, like the Macomb County or Oakland County bid, to compete. But Bill Crispin has certainly stepped up, and they are competing. They came within just a few $100, correct, Chief?
Yes, it's less than 2% difference. It was right around 500.
So, I mean, they've stepped up to the plate, and because they don't have the bid to supply, to the masses, if you will, of police agencies. So, so we're very thankful and grateful because we're supporting a local business, obviously, but at the same time, if we were to have to take it back to the dealership for something, they're just down the road as opposed to an hour or a couple hours away.
Okay, any further discussion? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have a motion to approve the purchase of the Chevy Tahoe. No further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The policy on the portable stage, item 1236. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 29, 2012 memo from Downtown Development Director Trapp to approve or not approve the application for use of portable stage policy and to approve or not approve the use fees as submitted for inclusion into the city's fee book. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
What's your motion?
To move and approve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
I do have one question.
Mr. Peters?
It's kind of a crazy question, but I read this application. If I rent the stage for Saturday night, and DPW sets it up Friday, and then Sunday it sits empty, and Monday DPW breaks it down, how many days rental is that? Am I charged for one day or more? It wasn't clear on this.
Practice
Does that make
is that the DPW director communicates with the person. If the person tells them we're having the event on Saturday and it's going to lay idle on Sunday for the convenience of DPW to pick it up on Monday, that's a one-day charge.
Okay.
Mr. Roth?
I'd like to have the clarification on the motion. Was it approve both parts of it, or just one part?
Yes, move to approve and approve.
Approve and approve, okay. And we have a second? Tahar, okay.
Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Roth?
I have a question regarding the fees. It set for $25 per section, and there'd be 10 sections. If someone wished to rent the entire stage, it would cost them $250. And besides that, they'd be paying for having it erected and taken down. It'll be close to $500 for some nonprofit group to rent that stage just for one day. I think this is kind of prohibitive if they're nonprofit, and I was wondering if perhaps a consideration of a lower fee rather than $25 per section might make it more permissible for a nonprofit to rent such and still come out in the black for their event.
Mr. Campbell, is Mr. Trapp here, or are you?
No, I am Mr. Trapp currently. So, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as far as the reasoning behind the justification, the fees, the setup, the $85 an hour, $120 an hour if it's on, for overtime type of purposes, that's the cost, and that's the cost of the DPW folks to do this, and it's modeled after the Showmobile contract. But just to back up a little bit further, this stage, if you may recall, the genesis of this was we wanted to get a stage for the Downtown Music Series, and we had applied for CARES. CARES had denied it. However, Community Ed said, hey, we do have they had some funds outside of the CARES that they would be willing to support the purchase of. We also had I think the Chamber and the Downtown Merchants, and I'm missing a couple here. Picnic in the Park, which is the Saline Summerfest, and then, of course, in the city, we all contributed to the purchase as approximately around $6,000, if I recall. And so the thought behind that, the intent was that when any of these 5 partners had an event to use it, they would use it. Well, of course, it's a great asset to have, and so different groups said, hey, we'd like to borrow that or use it, and the concern is that the more use that it gets outside of that, the more opportunity for things to either be broken, be lost, wear out sooner. And so we wanted to be able to, if something needed to be replaced, or to be able to, if something were broken, to replace it, if we had to order a new section, that type of thing. So that's the reason, the justification for the cost, the fees that have been set up as they are currently being proposed. So if it were, because we're kind of, the city is the holder, if you will, of the stage, and so we would be responsible for replacing, if we had to purchase a leg or a whole piece of the stage, those types of things, that we would be able to do that.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Rowe?
Well, yes, I understand that, but I also think that it says in the contract that whoever is borrowing such is responsible for any repair or damage that's required. Therefore, it looks like they would be the ones paying for it, rather than the fees.
That would be most, but the other thing is, again, that the reduced useful life, again, it's going to depend on how many people, how many groups use it, but if it gets continued use such as a showmobile does, the useful life will be decreased from what it is without that extra use.
Is there further discussion on the motion, Mr. Gearbox?
Just a quick question, and it's mandatory that they're required to use DPW to set this up and deliver it?
Yes, it's similar to the showmobile.
Just want to double check on that.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Hart?
Thank you. Just back to a question about the fees. I made the assumption, but didn't check it out when I read the memo, that the fees were also similar to the fee structure for the showmobile. Is that true?
The showmobile, I believe, is about $600 more.
Yeah.
Yeah, the showmobile can cost about $1,000 or $1,400 for renting it out, plus the labor back and forth. In terms of the cost compared to the value of the showmobile, this pricing would be slightly higher, as a proportion of the cost of it, but not much. It's in the same area. And if you have $6,000 worth of stage and you get it for $500, that may be a reasonable rental on a $6,000 thing.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the motion? We have a motion on the floor to approve and approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. That was a no, right? Correct, Mr.
Correct.
Item 1237, renewal of on-premise consumption liquor licenses. This is motion to acknowledge receipt of the March 1st, 2012 memo from City Clerk Hill, February 28th, 2012 memo from Police Chief Linman, the March 1st, 2012 memo from Building Inspector Taylor, the March 1st, 2012 memo from City Treasurer Bennett, and the February 29th, 2012 memo from Fire Chief Taft, to inform the Michigan Liquor Control Commission that the Saline, American Legion, Maplewood Lane, Stan's, Downtown Tavern, Wreck and Grill, Ruby Tuesday, Max and Saline, Bowako Sushi, and Mangiamo are in compliance with all local ordinance requirements, and the Saline City Council has no objection to the renewal of their 2012 liquor licenses.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Morrow, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Roth, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Is there any commissioner committee reports from council members on your discussion items? Mr. Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very brief. Last Thursday, we had a pretty intense training for all ZBA members, and we also invited members of council and members of the Planning Commission. And I believe, unless the city clerk corrects me, we had a majority of ZBA members there. My council colleague, Mr. Roth, and then I think a few representatives, including myself, from the Planning Commission. The training session was administered by our city planner, Doug Lewan, and overall, I think it was very well received, and you were there, excuse me, very well received and very beneficial. So I thank city staff, Clerk Hill, and probably city engineer Rubel for organizing that. Very beneficial. Thanks again.
And so what are the rules on that? Because my dad's on the ZBA in his town, and I was thinking of him. But can we pass that along? No? The booklet? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other commissioner committee reports?
Mayor?
Sorry, Mr. Beerbauer.
Youth Council. Unfortunately, last week, the Locking Out the Rec Center was to cancel for the first time in 10 years because there wasn't enough individuals that had signed up to participate. Apparently, there was a dance at the Saline Middle School, so there was conflicts and everything, so unfortunately, it couldn't occur. So thank you to the individuals that volunteered to work that night, and unfortunately for the Saline youth, they weren't able to participate in it, but hopefully next year we'll have it.
So they're not going to reschedule it for later this winter?
No. And then thankfully, based on an update I received from Mr. Campbell, that Saline Kiwanis and the Rotary had stepped forward to help support the symposium for the Youth Council, and they're all able to send all the students that are going, so it's great. I appreciate all that. And then Historical District Commission did meet last week and discussed it, the different issues that were on there, but we only had 4 people attend. We didn't have a full 7, so we ended up tabling a couple items again for another discussion. But also at that meeting, we discussed the overlay of the downtown overlay for the zoning that we've been talking about, and potentially how it will impact the historic district if a change to expand it on Henry Street may conflict with the historic district and what potentially may happen as part of a development. So we'll need to look at that and talk about that in the future when we actually bring that forward to the Planning Commission and probably to the council.
Okay. Any other commissioner committee reports? Okay, reports and other announcements. Mr. Morrow.
Thank you. I just have one. I was asked to announce that on March 15th at the Stone Arch facility located in the heart of downtown Saline, there's going to be a music concert, and I believe these music concerts happen in the late winter, early spring every year on the 3rd Thursday of each month at Stone Arch. Doors open at 7. The show begins at 7:30. This month it features Taylor Paxman from Saline as the opening act, and then the Dragon Wheel Band, who I understand are quite good. Again, that takes place on Thursday, March 15th. Doors open at 7. Show begins at 7:30. The prices are for reserve tickets $20, $15 for general admission, and $10 for students. And for more information, go to www.musicunderthearch.com.
Okay. Is there any further reports or announcements? If not, we'll move on to public comment or the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. I do want to state that I supported, in no way did I mean to not encourage the authorization of the study. What my concern was, now I notice apparently Tetra Tech also works for Saline Township, and as you pointed out, the developer didn't want to contribute any of the apparently, what, $55,000 or, and so that's what I was addressing. There definitely is a lot of concern on the present plant. But I think when it comes to expanding and bonding and other, expansion of, at that point, people have a tendency, they live in the city when it's functions, but when it comes to taxes, they live outside the city. And I think that it's important that we do share. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just to clarify, we're not talking about bonding or expansion at this time. So
I know.
Just wanted, okay.
I didn't say that.
Kind of.
Is there other public comment?
I'm Ethan Johnson from 482 Canterbury.
I'm Hunter Krebs, and I was just wondering why on Michigan Ave the speed limits were raised. Just a generalization. I just wanted to know.
Because it's a state-owned road,
It's a good question.
which means we don't have as much control over it as we would like, basically.
I'm Louis Remenap.
I'm Ryan Brophy.
I'm a member of the Saline Fiddlers, and he's a member of the high school jazz band. And on the renting out of the portable stage, I've played on them quite a few times, and they're a lot of fun, and it's cool to have the portability of it. So renting it out is a really good option, I think, to get more exposure for it.
Great.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, you'll be playing on it this summer, right, for the summer concert series?
Yeah, hopefully.
Jessica, Joe.
I'm Daniel Kosek. I was like, the old vehicle, you said it has like how many? 170, but 117,000. And you said like the life was around like 75,000. Why hasn't this been brought up, or has it been brought up before?
Because we're trying to save money.
Oh, okay.
The car was, we waited a year in the last budget year to cut the budget down to, we skipped a year to buy a vehicle,
Okay.
basically, to do with budget.
Good question, though. I just like to say it's great to have all you folks ask questions of the council, because you're really listening. Like, we can hear that you're really listening and asking informed questions. This is your community and your future, so keep up the good work, and I hope you come back sometime when your teacher doesn't make you come back. Or we do have a youth council, and there's lots of other opportunities to get involved. The Main Street program, we talked with Ms. Supko. We are planning on working with the youth to help promote activities in the downtown. We'd love to see you guys get more involved and do projects with us, because it's really the heart of the community. So thank you for coming tonight and asking such relevant questions. Is there any other public comment? Okay, is there any other business to come before the Saline City Council? I did forget that Todd and Lee and I met today with Paul Krutko, who's the director of Spark, and Luke Bonner, who does the retention visits in town, to start the process of that goal-setting strategy that we had under economic development, to do an economic development plan, and they're going to put together a proposal. We're proposing that we be a pilot for a model to use for other municipalities around the county for developing an economic plan, and we'll see how that goes, but I think it was a relatively successful meeting. They seemed open to helping manage the process with their expertise. So I don't know, Mr. Campbell or Mr. Burgoyne, if you want to add anything to that. No? Okay. As the upcoming meetings of Saline City Council, March 19th is our regular meeting, and then in April, we're going to be starting our budget work sessions. So April meetings start at 6 p.m. with the work meeting, and the regular meeting will be at 7:30. That would be April 2nd and April 16th. And then we need a motion to convene into closed session for the purpose of consulting with the city's attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with pending litigation. City Council will not reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of the closed session. Do we have a motion?
Move to convene in closed session.
Second.
Gearboss, second. Terhar. We have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Peters.
Here.
Councilmember Morrow.
Aye.
Councilmember Tahar.
Aye.
Councilmember Gearbeck.
Yes.
Councilmember Roth.
Aye.
Mayor Driscoll.
Yes. The meeting's adjourned to closed session at 8:40. Is that